If a nuclear facility like Natanz or Dimona is hit, the danger is not the explosion. The danger is what comes after. Radiation, an invisible force that spreads through air, water, and food, and stays for decades. We already know what that looks like. In 1986, at 1:23 a.m., a nuclear reactor exploded in Chernobyl. And what happened next changed everything. At the Chernobyl nuclear plant in Ukraine, a reactor exploded in a way the world had never seen before. This was not a normal explosion. It was the core of a nuclear reactor going out of control, releasing radiation equal to 400 Hiroshima bombs. Today, after 40 years, the area is still dead. The city of Pripyat, once home to 50,000 people, has become a ghost town. The radiation is still in the soil, still in the trees, and still killing. This video is not about anger or blame. It is about science, about a flawed design, a wrong experiment, and one button that changed everything. To understand how this disaster happened, how radiation kills silently, and why the area is still forbidden today, before we understand Chernobyl, we need to understand how a nuclear reactor works. At the core of any reactor, there are uranium atoms, a special type called uranium-235. This atom is unstable, like a tower stacked the wrong way. If a neutron, a very small particle, hits the nucleus, something powerful happens. The nucleus splits into two parts, releasing heat energy and, more importantly, releasing 2 or 3 new neutrons. These neutrons hit other atoms, splitting them, releasing more energy and more neutrons. This is called a chain reaction, like billiard balls. One hits another, then another, then another. Inside a reactor, we want this reaction to continue, but in a controlled way, so we can use the heat to produce electricity. How do we control it? With control rods. These are rods made of materials that absorb neutrons. If we insert them between the fuel rods, they absorb extra neutrons and the reaction slows down. If we pull them out, the reaction increases. It is like pressing the gas pedal in a car. We also use a moderator, like water or graphite. Its job is to slow down neutrons, making fission easier. All of this happens inside a massive steel vessel. The heat boils water, the water turns into steam, the steam spins turbines, and the turbines generate electricity. This is the general idea, but the Chernobyl reactor was different. The Chernobyl reactor was a type called RBMK, designed in the Soviet Union in the 1960s, and it had major differences from other reactor designs. The first difference was the moderator. In most reactors, the moderator is water. Water slows neutrons but does not increase the reaction. But in RBMK, the moderator was solid graphite, and graphite increases the reaction, making the reactor more active and less stable. The second difference was boiling water. In RBMK, water flows through pipes inside the graphite core. When water turns into steam, its amount decreases. In normal reactors, this reduces the reaction, but in RBMK, the opposite happens. Less water means more reaction, like a car that speeds up when you take your foot off the gas. The third difference was the control rods. Control rods are supposed to stop the reaction in emergencies, but in RBMK, the tips of the rods were made of graphite, so when they were inserted, the first part entering the reactor increased the reaction before stopping it. These three differences made the reactor unstable under certain conditions. It could still be safe if strict rules were followed, but on the night of April 26th, something went wrong. On the night of April 25th to 26th, 1986, workers were performing a test. They wanted to see how long the turbines would keep spinning after power loss to keep cooling water flowing until backup generators start. To do this, they had to reduce reactor power to 700 megawatts. But due to unstable behavior at low power, the reactor dropped to only 30 megawatts, a very low and unstable level. To raise power again, they removed most of the control rods, leaving only 6 to 8 rods out of 211, and the reactor became extremely fragile. At 1:23:40 a.m., the power suddenly began to rise. The operator pressed the emergency shutdown button, scram, inserting all control rods at once. But because of their design, the graphite tips entered first, causing a sudden spike in reaction. Within seconds, the power jumped from 30 megawatts to over 3,000 megawatts. At 1:23:44 a.m., just 4 seconds after pressing the button, a massive steam explosion occurred. The 1,000-ton reactor lid was blown off. Seconds later, a second explosion from hydrogen gas destroyed the building. The reactor core was exposed, and burning graphite released radiation into the air. At that moment, the nightmare began. At the moment of the explosion, no one felt anything. Radiation has no color, no taste, and no smell, but it was there. In the first night, 134 workers and firefighters rushed to the site. They had no protective suits and did not know the air they were breathing carried deadly doses. The lethal dose for humans is 4 to 5 gray. Some were exposed to 20 gray and others to more than 100 gray. Within weeks, 28 of them were dead. Others survived, but radiation had already started its silent war inside their bodies. Radiation did not stop there. After 36 hours, monitoring stations in Sweden detected abnormal radiation, and that is when the world found out, but it was too late. The 50,000 residents of Pripyat were not told and stayed breathing contaminated air for more than a day. The radioactive cloud carried iodine-131, especially dangerous for children. It fell with the rain onto fields. Cows ate contaminated grass. The radiation entered milk, and children drank that milk. Years later, thyroid cancer in children increased 100 times. By 2016, 7,000 additional cases were recorded. Between 1986 and 1990, 600,000 people were sent to clean the disaster, workers, engineers, and soldiers, known as liquidators. They removed radioactive soil and buried it in more than 800 sites. Each received an average dose of 100 millisieverts, some much more. Today, UN estimates suggest around 4,000 additional cancer cases, but this number is conservative and the real number is unknown. The most painful part was fear.
Women ended pregnancies out of fear. People left their homes for years, and the World Health Organization stated that the biggest health impact was not radiation, but the fear of radiation. After 40 years, the exclusion zone still exists, covering 2,600 square kilometers, larger than London. People never returned. The reason is cesium-137, which has a half-life of 30 years, meaning after 30 years, half remains, and to fully disappear, it takes around 300 years. In some villages, radiation is still 50 times above normal. The soil remains contaminated, and mushrooms and berries are still unsafe. Today, wildlife thrives there. Wolves, deer, and wild horses roam freely, but humans cannot return. Pripyat has become an open museum of radiation. The giant steel cover placed over the reactor in 2019 will protect the site for about 100 years, but after that, no one knows. This wasn't a bomb, it was a reactor. If you want to understand how something like this happens, watch our video on how nuclear reactors work, and subscribe for more simple science.